When you think about an athlete, about the best athlete of all time, you wouldn't really think about a very unathletic looking person. And yet, I think there's a fair argument for Vasily Alexeev, the double Olympic champion, being the greatest athlete of all time. Now, to start this, we can talk about the definition of an athlete, which is a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise. So an athlete is someone that does a sport, obviously, and the best athlete is a person that is the best in their sport, so much better than every other person is the best in their own respective sport, if that makes sense. Now, before we get to the part of Alexeev being the best athlete, we have to talk about Alexeev being the best weightlifter in the world. And for this, there are a few points that we can talk about, but the first ones will be purely performance related. So Alexeev is a person taking every sport, every professional activity that increased the world records by the biggest margin in his career. So now that might sound a little bit crazy to say, because out of all sport is a big claim, but hear me out. Let's just talk about the clean and jerk. Before Alexeev broke his first world record, the clean and jerk world record was under 500 pounds, or roughly 220 kilos. I'll put on the screen the exact numbers. At the end of his career, which was actually just right around 6 years later, Alexeev had increased the records at a point where 600 pounds in the clean and jerk almost seemed realistic. He clean and jerked 256 kilos in his very last competition. Then he also did this for the press, which he increased all the way up to 236.5 kilos. And he also did a little bit in the snatch, although not as much, and mainly in the total. Now, something else that Alexeev did that close to no other lifter ever done is have a successful transition from the press era of the sport to the biathlon era of the sport, which is the current state of weightlifting. Before 1972, Olympic weightlifting had the press, the clean and press, as an official movement of the sport. So the sport of weightlifting at the Olympics, at the World Championships, was first the clean and press, then the snatch, then the clean and jerk. After 1972, it was just the snatch and the clean and jerk, and it still is like this in every competition sanctioned by the IWF. Now, Alexeev was holding all the records before the switch, and he also held all the records after the switch when he retired. Apart from the snatch, obviously, but the snatch is such a different movement from the clean and jerk and the clean and press before that, that it almost makes sense. Now, what makes the difference between a guy like Vasily Alexeev and a guy like Lasha Talahadze, who is, as of today, the strongest weightlifter to ever live? In my opinion, is the sheer improvement on the total world records. It was done by such a big margin in such an incredible way that it's really not comparable. Lasha Talahadze increased the snatch world record from 216 kilos to 225 kilos, which is a big margin. That's 9 kilos. But Alexeev, only in the clean and jerk, increased it by 30 kilos, over 30 kilos, in the span of 6 years, which is even shorter than the career of Lasha Talahadze. Now, there are a few other things that are worth mentioning when taking into account that he's the best weightlifter of all time. The first one would be the biggest amount of world records ever broken, which was 80 world record. The reason why he was breaking so many records was that at the time of the Soviet Union, lifters of the national team were getting a certain amount of money for every world record that they were breaking. Because of this, Alexeev was going on and breaking the world records by half kilos. So because of this, he ended up with such an incredible amount of world record that it's not even comparable at all. Lasha Talahadze broke barely 10 world records, despite a weight class change, which do matter actually, because it kind of reset the standards to a lower level. Now, apart from this, there is the sheer domination. Like from 1970 to 1977, he didn't lose a single time, and he was not winning by a small margin either. It was pretty significant margin. And he did lose his last competition, which were the 1980 Olympics. But really, if you think about it, he only lost because he couldn't manage a snatch, which was unfortunate. Anyway, he was also an incredible lifter because of the sheer poundage of his lifts. He clean and jerked 256 kilos, which is to this day a podium lift. So any lifter that could manage a 256 kilo clean and jerk would end up on the podium at the World Championships at least. And if they have a somewhat decent snatch, maybe in the 190 kilo range or something like this, they would also most definitely end up on the podium nowadays. Not guaranteed, of course, because there are some really, really good lifters nowadays in the super heavyweight categories, but still. It is at least a top 5 world championship total and at least a top 3, maybe top 2, sometimes top 1 world championship clean and jerk by Alex. Right now we're in 2025 and it was set all the way back in 1977, so over 45 years ago. But that's not it, because Alexeev, on the opposite of what you might think and on the opposite of what most current lifters have, didn't really have that much of a support behind him. So very early in his career, before 1970 and his first world record, his first world championships, etc., he fired his coach. So that was, if my sources are right, 2 to 3 years before his first world championships. He just fired his coach and he started to train by himself, not really caring about anything other than himself in a way. And yet he just kept progressing. In 1970 he was obviously already a world champion, but he was still extremely weak compared to what he ended up doing just 2-3 years later. He was in a way obsessed with himself, which is often a trait of great athletes. They know what they want, they know how they want to do it, and they just stick with it. And because of this, I think that Alexeev is the person that pushed the sport of weightlifting, that pushed his sport the most by far. You could say that a guy like Naim Soleimanoglu pushed the sport, but in a way he pushed himself more than anything else. Some 30-40 years later, people didn't reach his level, but in a very different way, Alexeev just pushed the limits. So he set this world record, 256 kilos. And that's what the next generation built upon. And to this day, if Alexeev didn't increase the world record clean and jerk from 220 something kilos to 256 kilos, we probably wouldn't have as strong people, not only as strong weightlifters, but just as many strong people as we do right now. And I think that counts. So if you have any other athlete that just increased all world records, that pushed every limit of his sport by as big of a margin, feel free to let me know in the comment and we can talk about it.